Brought to you by Alman Auctions, the worldwide leader in antique tractor auctions.
Now let's turn the clock way back to 1962 when International Harvester came out with their Cub Cadet that changed everything in the garden tractor world. And Paul Tombaugh, you have a connection to Cub Cadets, don't you?
Yes, I found myself collecting them.
And why'd you do that?
Well, you start with one kind of by accident, and then pretty soon you got to have two, and then four, and I think the total is 12 right now. So I started off with the big tractors and kind of accidentally discovered the Cub Cadets. Even though we had one on the farm when I was, well, I guess it was a year before I went off to college. My dad bought a Model 70. So that I was aware of Cub Cadets back in 1963 anyway. And I guess once you get something in your blood, it's kind of there.
And tell us just a little bit about the 70 that you have right here. How is this one set up?
This one is got all the options available. Most people bought 70s really without a whole lot of frills on them. At that time, people seemed like they didn't buy something and then have to add all the options and all the bells and whistles only if they needed it. So the 70, since it kind of replaced the original, a lot of people consider that kind of the bare bones of the two models. So 70s often weren't found with much in the way of options. So what I did is I found all the options that were available for it and found them here and there and basically put them all in this Model 70.
So what are some of those extras, some of those options that you've added to this 1964 Model 70?
Well, lights, fenders, a creeper gear, a rear sleeve hitch. It's got a hydraulic lift. And then it has a rear power takeoff. And the rear power takeoff is relatively rare on most of the Cub Cadets. It turned out they never made anything that could make use of the power takeoff because it spun the wrong speed and also the wrong direction. So it's more of a novelty than anything.
I know the Cub Cadets were built in Louisville, Kentucky. Do you feel like it's, I guess, a part of preserving IH history to hold on to these garden tractors, even though you got farm tractors in your blood too?
Definitely. I have an attachment to the 70 just because we had one on the farm, and I was going off to college, and I think my dad thought, I guess I better buy one of these Model 70s to do the lawn mowing because my son's leaving the farm here. The 70 came out late in 1963 and did address a couple of the problems with the original. The original Cub Cadet had a belt drive to the clutch, and International Harvester dropped the engine lower in the 70 and its companion model, the 10 horsepower 100, and then had a direct drive, a direct shaft drive to the clutch. And they also made an extended frame because the rear end of the frame was weak in the originals. So just some improvements, but basically a very similar tractor. And he continued to buy Cub Cadets until he stopped mowing lawns and stuff.
Tell me just a little bit about the blade on the back of your 70. What's that all about?
International Harvester, of course, sold these with mower decks, which was probably the most common attachment that was sold. They had front snow blades, they had snow blowers, but International Harvester also came out with a rear blade and a landscape brake combination. And they're relatively rare, and I'm in search of the kind of the unusual and more rare attachments and options. This is something that could be used to level a driveway. It can be adjusted to do a little bit of cutting of like narrow ditches and stuff like that.
What do you like about driving the 70? What do you think they did well with this tractor way back in 1964?
Overall, it just has a solid feel. The steering is tight, well designed on them. I guess it's just, you can just tell you're on a very well built, kind of overbuilt piece of machinery, and that just kind of feels good.
And tell us just a little bit more about the power of the engine in this machine.
This has a 7 horsepower Kohler, single cylinder engine. Not too easy to compare the 7 horsepower engines of the yesterday with the new 20 plus horsepower engines of today. But the 7 horse is very adequate for most anything you would want to do with it.
Yeah, good hard working tractor in the garden, wasn't it?
Oh yes. I have a 10 horsepower, the same vintage, and I actually go to plow days, and I actually plow with a 10 horsepower version of this tractor.
What's your favorite thing about the Cub Cadet 70?
Well, I think the fact that it kind of evolved from the original, so it still has ties back to the original one with just a couple of improvements. And the fact that there was one on the farm, and I guess maybe that rekindles some of my boyhood fun times mowing the lawn.
Yeah, I mean, is it hard to believe you've got a tractor that's more than 50 years old that you still get to drive around and have a good time with?
That's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing with all this old equipment that it can be resurrected and made to perform just like it did when it was new.
I'm guessing when you're behind the wheel of this tractor, you might think about your dad a little bit.
Oh, definitely, definitely.
Paul Tombaugh from Illinois. He's got Red Power IH tractors in the blood, and now it's turned into a passion for Cub Cadets.